It's Nick's Halloween Spooktacular.
Better fortune, boy.
I was in a play. They cut my head off in Titus Andronicus. When I write plays, they'll be like Titus.
You admire it?
I liked it when they cut heads off, and the daughter mutilated with knives.
What's your name?
John Webster. Here, kitty, kitty. Plenty of blood. That's the only writing.
William Shakespeare, the apex of artistry, the bard of Avon, greatest poet in all the world, and master of horror. Shakespeare has written some pretty dark and spooky stuff. Think about it. All his famous works are tragedies that focus on people engineering their own demise. Hamlet is about a guy who may or may not be seeing a ghost and goes crazy from it, destroying his entire family and dooming his country as well. Macbeth tells the story of a man who makes a deal with the devil. Technically they're witches, but wait, witches are more Halloweeny, and murders all his friends for power. But by far, Shakespeare's most enduring testament to the grotesque is one of his earliest, the tragedy of Titus Andronicus. The story is set in ancient Rome, though it's not considered one of his Roman plays, and follows a general by the name of Titus. He comes home victorious from the war, having captured the Gothic queen Tamara. He initiates the action of the play by killing one of Tamara's sons in front of her for revenge for one of his sons dying to her forces. The newly crowned emperor wants to marry Titus's lovely daughter Lavinia, but her brother protests that she is betrothed to another. Titus accuses him of treason and murders his own son. The emperor scorns them and decides to marry Tamara instead. And that's just the first scene. A while later, they all go out hunting, and Aaron, Tamara's black lover, begins scheming against Titus. He gets her two surviving sons to kill Lavinia's boyfriend and violently rape her. To keep her silence, they chop off her hands and cut out her tongue. This is the most famous aspect of the play, the bit that has gone down in history, the equivalent of To Be or Not to Be, or St. Crispin's Day. They then frame Titus's other two sons, and the emperor is so enraged he automatically sentences them to death. Aaron brings word that if Titus cuts off his hand, the emperor will spare his son, and though he complies, he later returns with their severed heads and the dismembered hand. Also around this time, the queen gives birth to a mixed-race baby fathered by Aaron. He kills the midwife and flees into the hills. Titus is further sinking into madness and is attempted to be tricked by Tamara and her two sons. At first he seems to go along with it, but when he gets the chance, he murders them and begins cooking a new plot with Lavinia. Ah, father-daughter bonding. So then the next day, their scene is set. They all come to a feast where Titus asks the emperor if a father should perform a mercy killing on his raped daughter. The emperor says yes, he should, and Titus immediately kills Lavinia and reveals the entire plot to him. He also reveals that Tamara had been eating a pie that contained her son's baked heads. In a fit of rage, he finally kills her, though he in turn is killed by the emperor, who is also killed by Titus's one surviving son. The son is then proclaimed to be the new emperor. See, kids, if you scheme and murder enough people, you'll get somewhere in life. His first act is to have Aaron buried up to his neck, the more lamenting that he had not harmed more people. Okay, so that's the play in a nutshell. I know I spoiled it, but how many of you are going to read it, really? Oh, that many, huh? Okay. Anyway, this is one of the most hardcore and goriest stories I have ever read, and the entire effect is strengthened due to the fact that it's Shakespeare, the most renowned poet in the world, also told the ultimate slasher story. Forget Michael, Jason, and Freddy. Titus is where it's at. No, not that Titus. The play has of course been hated throughout much of its history, with the Victorians dismissing it as garbage and generally pretending it didn't exist. They were like that in most things, as a matter of fact. Hey! Do you think this story inspired Jack the Ripper? Was there school censorship back then? T.S. Eliot even called it one of the stupidest and most uninspired plays ever written. Yeah, he said that about Willie Shakespeare. I mean, damn, the guy was just trying to capitalize on what was popular. These kinds of plays were all the rage in England at the time, and Shakespeare was just like, yeah, I can do with that. And do it he did. I think one of the most disturbing aspects of it is that for all its blood and gore, chopping of heads, and cannibalism, it's still kind of censored. A lot of the killing is done off-screen, and especially the rape of Lavinia. I think this is the most horrendous aspect of the play and should always be suggested, never shown. The rest of it can be drenched in blood, but the taking of the young maiden is what is most gruesome, and nothing on screen can compare to what your imagination shows. And so, as far as films go, there haven't been a lot. There was supposed to be a version with Christopher Lee, but it fell through. There was a TV version in 1985, but it wasn't too terribly popular, and then they partied like it was 1999. Simply titled Titus, a film came out which starred Sir Anthony Hopkins and Jessica Lange of King Kong fame. It was very, very strange. It featured deliberate and severe anachronisms, like having guns next to swords, Romans riding tanks, and beer bottles with wine goblets. They said this was to give a timeless quality, as though the story were not hindered by the cosmic linearity of time. Yeah, it makes no sense, but none of those people ever do. The movie's okay. It's well acted and decently directed. You can never go wrong with casting Anthony Hopkins.
You know your mother means to feast with me and calls herself revenge and thinks me mad. Hark, villains. I shall grind your bones to dust, and with your blood and it I'll make a paste, and of the paste a coffin I will rear, and make 2 pastries of your shameful heads, and bid that strumpet your unhallowed dam, like to the earth, swallow her own increase.
But it's just so damned weird. I'd like to see a real film of it, set in the splendor of ancient Rome, with a huge Hollywood budget and good stars, and droves of blood. The problem is that Hollywood is stupid, and they would make a spectacle of the rape scene. Come on, you know they would. Another thing I wanted to mention is the character of Aaron. He's a devious little shit, plotting against everybody, and is arguably the real villain of the piece. He's also black, or a Moor as they were called back then. And of course he fathers a mixed-race baby with a white queen. Why them brothers always be chasing whitetail? Ain't nobody got time for that! But still, he's probably Shakespeare's most prominent black character, with the exception of Othello, of course. He was portrayed by possibly the most famous black actor of the 19th century, a Mr. Ira Aldridge. In his portrayal, he cast Aaron as the hero, saving Lavinia from rape and not sleeping with the honorable Queen Tamara. And of course, this was a huge hit with the uptight Victorians of the time. So there you go, racial equality culled from the blood-slicked bones of Shakespeare. There was also a drawing of the play, the only known image to survive from Shakespeare's time. It depicts a brief overlook of the play with some quoted dialogue and some scratched notes. Scholars use this to try and get a look into Shakespeare's time to see how he lived and what people thought of him. I suppose they think it's a shame that it depicts such vileness. One reason it may have survived is because while the play has been abhorred in modern times, it was horrendously popular in its day. It was probably the story that put Shakespeare on the map. There you go. People have been getting their start in horror for all time. And that's just it. People have been obsessed with horror for all time. H.P. Lovecraft said, "Fear is the oldest and strongest emotion of mankind," and you can look and see some of the oldest texts contain fear, digging deep into people's psyches. Yes, they tried to suppress it and say they didn't like things like that, but look, one of the greatest horror stories of all time came from Victorian London. No matter how much you try to pretend it isn't there, you can't escape it. I think that's why horror stories have persisted, because people know the world is a dangerous place, and that no matter how sophisticated and relaxed civilization becomes, fear will always be lurking within us. You can run to the ends of the earth, but you'll find the monsters are there waiting for you.